It's an extremely overwhelming experience to walk into a room with your very young, healthy husband and see him hooked up to dozens of machines and IVs. He literally was alive because of modern medicine keeping him alive, and these machines breathing for him and helping his body.
The pandemic has taken a devastating toll on police departments across the country. COVID is now killing more law enforcement officers than guns, vehicles, or any other threat they face in the line of duty.
Anti-vaxxers are now contracting coronavirus and unfortunately dying as a result. And we're hearing more and more from family members who are remorseful for listening to the anti-vaccine disinformation that you're likely to hear in various right-wing circles.
I want people to slow down and think. This is not a political discussion. This is a healthcare discussion. Turn off social media, turn off the news, talk to your doctor, ask the doctors and nurses that are in the hospital day in and day out dealing with this.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I was hoping to get this out yesterday, but based on the Boulder fire and being pretty close to one of the evacuation areas, I didn't focus on the video, but I hope you guys are doing well. I put this together because I thought it was important that people understood how many cops were actually dying of COVID, and to wake everybody up and maybe get this word out and save some cops. So please stick around to the end. The story actually finishes, and if you like what we do here, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, drop a like down below, and share this out. Hope you have a good year. Thanks.
I know with all the misinformation out there, it is really difficult to decide to get vaccinated or not, but I can assure you from this experience that it's a much more difficult decision in your 20s and 30s to decide how you want to bury your spouse. My name is Chastity Reeves, and I am 26 years old, and I live in a rural town in northwest Arkansas. My husband Caleb is 29, and he is a big teddy bear. He's a big, lovey guy. He never ends a phone call without saying I love you.
I'm Curtis Reeves. I am Caleb Reeves' older brother. He was a great guy. He'd help anybody. It didn't matter who it was or where you were. He'd help anybody. When I heard he was positive with COVID, I thought to myself he'd be okay because of his age. I knew he wasn't vaccinated, but I thought down in my heart that he'd be okay.
COVID-19 has hit law enforcement particularly hard since the pandemic began.
Since January, one of the nation's largest police unions counts 724 officer deaths due to COVID. Officers in Texas, Florida, and California with the highest death tolls.
A procession carried 23-year-old Freddie Castro, an Overland Park police officer, to his final resting place tonight.
Friends and family members gathered there to honor him.
He was someone who was just always there for you. He definitely made you feel better. On a bad day, he was just a kind soul, someone you always needed.
Officers say Castro died in the line of duty after a month-long battle with COVID-19.
As we all know, some people are extremely vocal in opposing COVID vaccines and face masks, and now some of those people are dying from COVID.
Police unions like the Fraternal Order of Police have urged members in departments where vaccines are not mandated to nonetheless get vaccinated. COVID, they tell the union, is an equal opportunity killer, no matter age, race, or gender. The sheriff fears if he enforces the mandate, he'll lose up to 10% of his 18,000-member force.
As I said, no, I'm not forcing anyone.
Because most departments don't keep statistics on who is vaccinated and who is not, it's unclear what percentage of law enforcement who've died from COVID skipped a jab in the arm.
An Austin police officer has died from COVID-19, marking the first officer the department has lost to the virus since the start of the pandemic.
Now at 5, a department in mourning. This evening, the first LAPD officer to die from COVID-19 is being remembered.
St. Petersburg police officer Michael Weiskopf recently died in the line of duty. An 18-year veteran who was unvaccinated was felled not by a bullet, but by COVID. Officer Weiskopf's wife at his funeral talking to his brothers and sisters in law enforcement.
The virus is lethal. You do not want to take this battle on. I promise you it's grueling, dangerous, and it will destroy you.
On Monday, 2 North Carolina law enforcement officers who died from COVID laid to rest. Their vaccination statuses unknown.
This was not Mike's time.
Conservative radio host Mark Bernier died over the weekend. He called himself Mr. Anti-Vax and told his listeners, "I'm not taking it. Are you kidding me? Mr. Anti-Vax." He is the third conservative radio host to question or criticize the vaccine, then pass away from the disease recently.
COVID is now the leading cause of death for the men and women in blue. Still, there is a reluctance to get vaccinated. In Memphis and Louisville, just 47% of officers have been vaccinated. And in Philadelphia, just 13% of police department employees have provided proof of vaccination.
In San Jose, California, veteran officer Dave Gutierrez quit rather than get vaccinated.
To me, it's, my faith, my belief in what I know my body and what I want to put into it. So my choice is not to be vaccinated.
A Texas man who led an anti-mask movement has also died from COVID. He created the San Angelo Freedom Defenders group that held a rally to combat COVID-19 tyranny.
When Caleb became ill on July 1st, he had very mild symptoms. He had just a minor temperature. He had a headache. A few days later, he actually passed out, and so we made a trip to the hospital just to have him checked out. It turned out he was just dehydrated, but that was the day that he actually tested positive for COVID. He progressively got worse over the course of about a week, to the point that we had to return to the hospital about a week later.
New at 5, the death of a Fond du Lac police officer due to complications of COVID-19 is being called a line of duty death. In a Facebook post, the department says Officer Joseph Curer contracted COVID while on duty. He passed away Wednesday.
Kerr survived by his wife and 2 kids. One was born the night before he passed away. In a written statement, Jim Palmer with the Wisconsin Professional Police Association said Officer Kerr's passing is an enormous loss for our state's law enforcement community. And Palmer pointed out that COVID-19 has served as the single largest cause of death among law enforcement officers since the pandemic began.
Police officer Christopher Cockburn lost his battle against COVID-19 last month. On September 14th, at the age of 59, he was dead.
I miss him a lot.
When he was over there in the hospital by himself for those 4 or 5 days, he would FaceTime us, and you could see the sheer terror and panic in his eyes.
Throughout the course of the virus, we had several conversations about the fact that we were thankful that the vaccine's available, but that we felt like we were way too young and way too healthy to need to worry about getting it.
Stacy, this wall of photos from Illinois to Texas and the Carolinas to California reveals a stunning fact. COVID is the #1 police killer this year and was last year as well.
Police officers, 3 fathers, 3 COVID deaths. Arizona's law enforcement community mourning the loss of 3 of their own in the past week.
These 2 men, Deputy Jody Hull and retired police officer Eddie Bounds, they have died of complications related to battling COVID-19.
Tragic time for law enforcement in Broward County. 7 people from the sheriff's office have now died of COVID-19 complications. The latest, Sergeant Shane Owens. He was 48. He'd been working with the agency since he was just 18. His father also worked there. Sergeant Owens had been hospitalized and on a ventilator before he passed away on Saturday. These are all the law enforcement members in Florida who have died of COVID-19 over the past year. There are 18 that we know of who contracted the virus on the job and died in the line of duty. 4 local law enforcement members have died of COVID. JSO Lieutenant Chris Cunningham, Clay County Sergeant Eric Twisdale, JSO Auxiliary Sergeant Lou Livitino, and Nassau County Deputy Jack Guinness. There were even more deaths in Georgia. We're aware of 22, and they include deputies, sergeants, corrections officers, and a captain. We've posted all their photos on news4jax.com if you'd like to read about each member and where they served.
I do think the rural communities don't get the vaccine as much because we're out on the farm. We think we don't go anywhere, but You go to the gas station to get fuel, or you go to Walmart and you pass by somebody, or go to church and you sit in one pew over, there's a chance to be exposed to it.
He spent 30 days in the hospital. He spent 25 of those days on a ventilator, completely unconscious. So only the first few days were we able to communicate with him and talk to him over the phone and things like that.
First, though, a local police department mourning the loss of one of their own after the officer died battling coronavirus. Port Orange police officer Justin White was just 39 years old.
Meantime, sad news from Fort Lauderdale's police department, the force announcing that one of their own had passed away from the virus. She joins a Florida Highway Patrol trooper who we're also learning has died. Meantime, Florida reporting more than 150,000 new cases in just the past week alone.
Frederick Police Department announced that the death of Officer Greg Santigello. He passed away Tuesday night experiencing complications from COVID-19.
Officers has died from complications of COVID-19. 47-year-old Jack Nice was a 17-year veteran of the department and was most recently assigned to the Park Station.
So the day Caleb was placed on the ventilator, the doctor called and allowed me the opportunity to come see him in person before they sedated him and inserted the ventilator. So I talked to him for about 15 minutes. I held his hand and we prayed together.
First day I went in, it was really hard. I couldn't talk to him. I've never seen anything like that. I hope I and no one else ever sees that again.
He was just a light. Whenever he walked into a room, he lit up the room. He had a huge smile and an infectious laugh. It's an extremely overwhelming experience to walk into a room with your very young, healthy husband and see him hooked up to dozens of machines and IVs. He literally was alive because of modern medicine keeping him alive and these machines breathing for him and helping his body.
I want people to slow down and think. This is not a political discussion. This is a healthcare discussion. Turn off social media, turn off the news, talk to your doctor, ask the doctors and nurses that are in the hospital day in and day out dealing with this.
Since January, one of the nation's largest police unions counts 724 officer deaths due to COVID. Officers in Texas, Florida, and California with the highest death tolls.